Hello, Reluctant Messengers Unleashed listeners. Welcome to version 2, and welcome to Candy, my dear friend. After, if you can believe it, a 3-year break since we started, Candy and I are here to offer an update. We will start with version 2, episode 1. Hello, Candy.
Donna, it all started when I was a guest on your program. Then we quickly transitioned to a YouTube channel you founded called The Reluctant Messenger Unleashed. We have about 30 videos there, and we'll also add these newest episodes to that channel. And Donna, it is so hard to believe. It has been over 3 years since you began that Reluctant Messenger Unleashed YouTube channel.
Yeah, Candy, I can't believe it either. But it was interesting. During my podcast, my guides whispered to me that we should do a podcast going over all the chapters of your book. And you got cold chills. And we decided that that was a great idea. So the Reluctant Messenger Unleashed was born. Now we're doing version 2 to update everyone on the tools. The tools themselves have changed over time, and our knowledge and use have also changed.
Donna, I remember when you suggested The Reluctant Messenger Unleashed as a title, and I had this vision that flashed in front of my eyes, and that gave me cold chills. I saw this hunting dog like a pointer that was just tearing through this open field, and he was flushing out all these hidden flocks of birds. Those birds were silent. They were hiding until the dog disturbed them. And this is exactly what we would do, and we did do. As we delved into my first book, we flushed out those hidden truths behind the stories. And as these new insights came, I realized that the information that we had was so valuable that I updated my first book, The Reluctant Messenger, with the findings that we discovered. So I replaced The Reluctant Messenger with the second edition. We stepped into those 5D spaces during our interviews. And as the series progressed, our guides sometimes surprised us, often in the middle of an episode. Donna, I'll never forget this, but do you remember when your screen turned green?
Oh my gosh, yes. That was unbelievable, as it never happened in any of my other Zoom calls. It flashed several times, and we wondered what was going on. And it came at a time when you were talking about your angels and plants, right?
Yeah, we were talking about this vision that I had about picking a flower. The messenger showed me the same scene in 2 different ways. In the first scene, I picked a flower, took it home, I put it in this vase of ice cold water. But I saw this from the perspective of the plant and the flower, and it felt so cold and so sterile. And actually, it was pretty brutal. But then, Donna, the second vision showed the very same scene, but before cutting the flower, I connected energetically and telepathically with the plant. I asked the plant for permission to take the blossom home because it was so beautiful. I loved it. When the plant gave me permission, yes, it gave me permission to take the flower, it also showed me where to make the cut. I saw this energy that came up from the roots, and then it went over to the branch, the little stem or a stalk, whatever, where the blossom was. And there was this little zigzag motion. And I realized it was not only showing me where to cut, it was sealing off the energy. So when I saw that, I cut the plant right there. I cut the flower. And then, so differently from the first time, I gently lifted the flower to take it home. Now, as I did this, there was this trail of beautiful pink and green sparkles of energy that followed the plant. Until we had that episode, Donna, I had not recognized the significance of this vision. These colors, the pinks and greens, are the colors I see when I connect with the angelic realm. But this vision of cutting the flower was so early in my journey that I had not even realized that angel connection to those colors. But when we're recording this episode, and I'm talking about the golden sparkles and the pink and the green energy, I started thinking about the message that came with the vision. And the message was about our connection to source. And even though we might feel isolated at times, we are always connected to the greater good. It's always there, that connection. Now, at the time, I didn't realize the pink and green energy between the plant, which represented source, and the individual flower, representing us. That connection, the pink and green, are those invisible bonds, those angelic connections to source. We may not see them, but they exist. Donna, we are never alone. Our angels are always with us. But while we're recording this episode, in real time, talking about this angelic connection, your screen turned green. And what was it? It was a wink from the angels to pay attention. Now, take a look at the screen. I've gone back to that episode in the Reluctant Messenger Unleashed. And let's look at this clip and we'll see what happened before we move on. I still get cold chills. Your screen turning green was just one example of those magical things that occurred during the unleashing of my first book. And when we did our deep dive into the Reluctant Messenger, by the time we finished, we had this treasure trove of psychic tools. Now, I didn't know it. I didn't realize what they were when I had the experiences. But it's only your help, that we uncovered these. We summarized them in the last 2 bonus episodes on our YouTube channel. But Donna, you also took our tools and categorized them. That was brilliant, the way you did that. And now, 3 years later, once again, we have another larger perspective. And we see that some of the tools have changed and other tools have remained constant. I have a better understanding of how and why these tools work. And I hope that that understanding will help the audience. Let me tell you a story. I recently returned from Starlines 2. That's a graduate level program at Monroe Institute, where once again, I saw psychic tools in action. You see, once you begin to make these tools, the process becomes easier and more spontaneous. And this is precisely what happened. In an early exercise in Starlines 2, we were going to move as a group to focus levels 42 and 49. That's when I found myself shrinking so small until I was smaller than an atom. And next, this giant wall appeared. And it looked like it was like a crosscut of a giant honeycomb. But I realized exactly what this was. I took a deep breath. I didn't know what it would do, but I knew that it was a tool. So I figured I'm not going to judge this. Whenever it's ready to behave like a tool, I will know about it. Answers would arrive. Now that's where the trust comes in online. But it didn't take long for me to realize that each cell of that honeycomb was a wormhole. Now, was it really a wormhole, that theoretical shortcut into the cosmos? I don't know. Who knows? And who cares? Because those honeycomb cells brought me immediately to focus 42 and focus 49. I did not have to go through that entire process that my Starlines 2 classmates did. I jump-started the adventure. But let me give you an aside. In the programs at Monroe, especially in the Starlines programs, group energy is very powerful and important. So there really was an aspect of me that intentionally connected with my classmates Now, we call that bilocation in the 5D, and we've talked about that in other episodes. But I was in two places at once. I was on Voyager 8, traveling with my classmates, while this other aspect of me jumped ahead to the destination by the way of that wormhole. So I did both. But back to that tool of a honeycomb. Not surprisingly, the instructors in Starlines 2 mentioned a honeycomb type structure a few days later in the program.
Candy, this is exactly what happens when we start to work together and bring our audience these tools, right?
Absolutely. And Donna, although I'm always, I guess, astounded by these connections, it really should not be surprising. When we are in those 5D spaces, we are no longer bound by 3D time. So it's easy to pick up on advanced or future knowledge or activities.
That was quite a lot, Candy. So let's go ahead and jump in with the foundations that you covered in these past episodes. Those concepts are key, not just in understanding, but in discovering new tools. So let's go ahead and share the changes we've seen, but let's start with a larger perspective, beginning with those 4 foundational principles.
Okay, Donna, using that honeycomb wormhole example is a great way to transition to these principles, a change and upgrade from our earlier findings. By the way, we now have 4 principles, but I'm certain that too will change because as we evolve along with our understanding, so do the tools and the foundations. Now, take a look at the screen. I've discussed these foundational principles at length in the past episodes in this series, and our audience can go back and review these for more detail. These are the foundations for psychic tool development. They help us achieve an out-of-body state, but they also assist us as we navigate in those 5D environments. When we understand all these concepts, we will see why our psychic tools work. These foundations set the blueprint, the foundation for more tool development. And then we begin to see tools appearing automatically, just like my honeycomb dashboard. But let's look at the one we listed first, that environment. We mentioned the environment first because of its importance. I've nicknamed this the Tesla filter. I even began my first book with that famous quote from Nikola Tesla. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. When we step into the 5D, that multidimensional reality beyond the physical, it's easier to understand that everything is energy because we see it immediately. It's like touching a hot stove in the 3D. You don't stop and think about it as it's happening. And you don't keep your hand on the stove and figure out what's going on here. No, you jerk your hand away from that as fast as you can. That's how the 5D environment works. It's like that hot stove. It is so energy responsive that our manifestations occur instantly and automatically. And when that happens, we can no longer deny that connection between intentions and manifestations, between the T and the A in the TEA, thoughts, energy, action formula. You pick up a psychic tool to use it in the 5D, and it works automatically. Now, here's the problem. Well, I shouldn't really say problem. Here's the challenge. The challenge is to recognize this energy responsive environment in our 3D lives. When we see life through the Tesla filter of energy, frequency, and vibration, everything changes. That mystical, that woo-woo drops away. It's replaced by understanding. But yeah, it still feels magical. It still feels mystical. But now we can explain it. It's not woo-woo, it's physics. Once we realize that the 3D environment too is energy responsive, We understand how words, thoughts, and emotions affect others. We see why smiling at a stranger can influence their day. Our thoughts may seem internal, but their frequencies drift into the environment. So, this is our first foundational principle, Donna, the environment. Understanding our environment through that Tesla filter.
I love that. Thank you, Candy. And what's remarkable, this is exactly what I was experiencing during my NDE concerning telepathic communication and the navigation. It's immediate. But what I would like to do next, it's my turn, and it's principle number 2, visualizing awareness, the POE, and timeline. And you guys know that I love the POE, the point of existence. Point of existence, the POE, is a concept the messengers gave Candy to visualize consciousness, to visualize awareness. Seeing our POE tells us whether our consciousness is restricted, we see it as a dot, or expanded into a 3-dimensional globe. During our day-to-day lives, the POE is often a dot, resting deep inside our bodies. That's why many people think that they are their physical bodies, because that's where their awareness is. So it's a key. Visualizing our awareness takes on a new understanding when we look at how it influences time. So these two concepts go together. Our degree of expansiveness directly influences our perception of time. As a reminder, time is not linear. It's not a straight line from event A to event B. Just like our point of existence, our dot isn't who we really are. As Bob Monroe says, we are more than our physical bodies. And the messengers told Candy that time is fluid. It's not straight, but curvy like a sine wave. When our expanded consciousness through meditation, an OBE, an out of body, or an NDE, a near-death experience, plant-based rituals, prayer, or dreaming, all of those, when our expanded consciousness is superimposed over the curvy timeline, our dot transforms to a 3-dimensional globe, which then covers more of the fluid timeline. So it's no longer a dot traveling on the timeline, but the timeline is compacted within our awareness, allowing us to access the past, maybe even our timelines, maybe even lifetimes ago, or the probabilities of the future. And I use this every time I remote view. I don't know if you knew that, but I use it every single time. Visualizing our consciousness as a dot is key to using some of the tools that we talk about.
Donna, I covered this in detail in previous episodes, but I still have to repeat. When I finally understood how our awareness, our POE, point of existence, interacts with time, it clarified so much for me. For example, I now understand how psychics work. You know, you go to these people and they reach into your past and they divulge this information like there is no way they would know this. The psychics, what they do is expand their awareness, their POE, well beyond the physical body. So their point of existence changes from that particle state, that dot that you love, to that 3D globe, which is a waveform. And the messengers tell me it's actually a globe of life force energy. And when they expand into that field state, the greater their awareness becomes, the more access they have to events that we know of as time in our 3D lives. So if we stay constricted as a dot, we only see the present moment. But what I love about this foundational principle of visualizing awareness, it has helped me understand the psychic tools. I know that when I expand my POE to access my place in the 5D, for example, I not only use my tools, but now I can see how they work. Recently, Donna, I was a guest on a podcast where I talked about time being fluid and how it functions. like a sine wave. It's not really that straight line from point A to point B. But during this podcast, a member of the audience asked a question that became such an aha moment for me. He asked whether the sine wave that I used to describe time was an energy wave. Oh my gosh, Donna, I had to laugh. Well, of course it is. But I had not realized that until he asked that question. It is so obvious. The messengers even call it a sine wave. Now, I talked to my good friend, Professor Google, and he said, because I had never even looked this up, he said a sine wave is a single frequency with a smooth recurring oscillation. So, in other words, time is an energy wave, a pure, continuous frequency of energy. Now, what I had done, and it had worked for me, I had only focused on the curvy shape of the sine wave. And that did allow me to understand its relationship with awareness. And that worked. That was okay. But when our awareness expands on that sine wave, that energy wave of time, the greater we expand, the more time that collapses within the awareness. This is when we can actually bend space and time because we understand the fluid nature of time. So now when I see our POE expand on that sine wave, I realize our first foundational principle, Tesla's energy filter, shows how our expanded awareness compresses time. But when I understand that the sine wave is an energy wave, I know how it works. And that's a big difference between seeing and understanding. Donna, I'm still learning. My grandkids, they'll tell me something and it's new information, and they joke and they say, hashtag Nana's still learning. So Nana is still learning here. But even when the obvious hides from me in plain sight, like a sine wave being an energy wave. But you know what? This is also like our psychic tools. It took your unleashing of those for me to see them for what they were and are and what they do. These tools are powerful devices for our out-of-body travel, so much more.
And what's interesting, Candy, is how it shows up different for you from you and me. Even though a sine wave goes this way, it has changed for me and it goes this way. That's why I started doing a circle, much like the Monroe logo. So this happens to you all the time, though. So this tells me when you're correct, because when you experience things first and then afterwards get a validation from somewhere else, I know you're on the right track. So let's move on to the T formula that is in the third foundational principle.
Oh my goodness, the T formula, TEA, thoughts, energy, action. And this is something, of course, we covered in our initial YouTube videos. But I see life through that first principle, the Tesla filter, that environment of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that second principle of visualizing awareness with our POE and that curvy timeline, that helps me understand how I fit into life, 3D and 5D. I see how my expanded state influences my perception of time. But Donna, it is this next foundational principle, this third one, the TEA formula, thoughts, energy, action, where things really become interesting. Why? Because we are no longer passively viewing the world through a lens, through the Tesla filter, or through visualizing our awareness on a sine wave. But instead, we are actively interacting with our surroundings with purpose and intent. In this principle, the TEA formula, it's all about the E. That energy is that connective tissue between our thoughts and the manifestation, which is our action. That would be the manifestation of those thoughts. But that correct T keeps our intentions, our thoughts on track in order to manifest what we planned on manifesting. And that's where we can actively, not only can, but we do actively intervene and interact, whether we're aware of it or not. So in our 3D lives, because manifestation takes more time, many of us are unaware that we can and do manifest all the time. Once we understand that, then we can use our tools to keep our thoughts aligned with the action. And that's where the TEA formula comes into work, into action. My messengers say that intentions, so that's the thought, the T in the TEA formula, are organizing principles. The messengers tell me that intentions operate just like invitations or evites. You have to let them go. You have to send them. If you hold on to your thoughts, it won't manifest. They will not manifest. If you leave your invitations on your dining room table or your evites in your outbox without hitting send, no one will ever know about your event. Your invitations aren't sent, so they are never received. My messengers tell me that information, which is energy, that comes from the 5D is like water in a garden hose. That hose, when it's not in use, quite often is crimped. We need to prime the pump sometimes to start that process. And one way to do that is by using our imagination to keep that that energy flowing.
Candy, I'd like to offer something up for our listeners, and I totally agree with your messengers here. And it's about if you get stuck in that intention, if you get stuck or you can't get started, and you say this, use your imagination. You start with your imagination, then let the universe take over the journey, because it will move your imagination and let that garden hose really get pumping. So you move from imagination to the truth because of the validation you will receive. So I'm going to give you another example about that. My good friend Tom Campbell wrote and developed an imagination theme park called Tom's Park. And it was written primarily for left brain thinkers who are having problems with the right brain intuitive exercises. So the left brain we think of as thinking and the right brain as imagination, and people just couldn't seem to get started. So like you said, their intention, they couldn't get it going. So I'm going to quote from his book, quote, Tom's Park is a training program, a game, a manual, a tool designed to help you develop your intuitive side, to work within an intuitive space without your intellect crashing in to spoil the process. It improves your ability to be creative and enable you to both solve complex problems and to see the bigger picture. It will help get rid of fear, gain confidence, and provide you with choices that will improve the quality of your consciousness. It folds right into what we're saying here. So it's a book and a map, and the purpose is to start using your imagination. So you have his game, you have his book, and you start using your imagination. And then he says, then let the universe helps you from there. So start off, imagine a day in a park when you were a kid, then use his map, explore the park, get started, and don't worry about your left brain when it says, is that my voice? Is that my voice? You just let your imagination start and just keep going, and the universe will take care of you from there.
That is perfect. That is a great example, Tom's Park. And the fact that he even calls it a tool, it makes it even more special. But using your imagination is exactly what Tom says. That's what my messengers say. It's that starting point that primes the pump, like that garden hose the messengers tell me about. I'd love Tom's suggestion to use your imagination to what? Stop your intellect, your observer, from spoiling the process. Our intellect is often that voice of the observer. telling us what's logical and what is not. It informs us, think about this, based on our previous experience. But when we deal with the 5D, Donna, many of us are in new territory. So we don't have a foundation of past experiences. That's why we think we make it up. This is why the T formula, thoughts, energy, action, is so important. And all the foundational principles are, for that matter. The T formula lets us step back and see what energizes our thoughts. We cannot rely on intellect. Often there are no past experiences. So instead, we focus on what fuels our intention, that E in TEA. And understanding these underlying principles helps empower us and our out of body experiences. Now, it's really such an easy concept, TEA, but when we become aware of this formula, it can change everything. We realize, Donna, that we determine the energy we use. Now, of course, let me do a little aside here. I take no credit for this, and just like the POE and the time, all these concepts come directly from my messengers. That's why I know they're true. But they tell me that thoughts become things. They have said that, my messengers, over and over again. We see this when we're in the 5D, and Donna, you're like me, you're a frequent flyer in the 5D, but we're in the 5D, we think of something, boom, it's there, or go somewhere and we're there. It's instant manifestation. Like the times I've heard you talk about, when you're describing your NDE, you think of something and it happens. But this T formula also explains why things go haywire, why those best laid plans of mice and men sometimes take unexpected turns, and how we are the ones who actually derailed those initial intentions. Sometimes it's precisely as Tom Campbell says, our intellect comes on board to try to explain the inexplicable. Now, I won't go into detail here because I covered this in previous episodes, but the quality of the E, the energy, is so important in tool development and OBE travels. My messengers say, for example, that the vehicle, the energy body we use in OBEs, depend on the fuel we use. Why take a trike when we can use a Lamborghini? And those are actually words they tell me they use. So why roll out of your physical body into a dense energy body and explore your 3D neighborhood when you can take a finer, subtler energy body and access divine realms where angels are and guides, or use that to explore the cosmos?
Candy, what's interesting about this is you got me to understand my dense energy body. And it was really interesting because my acupuncture teacher told me the difference between using my needles I was using them in a difficult way. And he said, why are you doing that so hard? I want you to learn subtle touch. And I learned the subtle touch. So why didn't that apply to this? This is how Candy got me to understand my dense energy body. I told Candy, Candy, I'm trying to go out of body with some of these common OBE techniques, like rolling out of my body and going into my dense energy body and exploring my neighborhood. I just couldn't follow along, and I wasn't able to go out of body this way. And I'm telling her this. And remember from the previous episodes, I had already told Candy of some of my natural, subtle OBE experiences where I just had an intention of going out of body, but I didn't use any techniques. And I told her about the time I was writing a comment across the universe, and Candy explained this to me. Donna, you already mastered OBE on my own. Those common OBE techniques don't apply to me, just like my acupuncture. I had already bypassed it and gone into the subtle energy body. Thank you, Candy.
You're welcome, Donna. And you know what? I see this so often, especially with a lot of Monroe Institute graduates. They're trying so hard using that pre-K curriculum when they are already they have a PhD. But Donna, yes, you were past this. You were trying to go back, but you had already graduated. Donna, you are one of the first people I know that travels as extensively as I do in the cosmos. And I think that's one reason why we connected so quickly. Whether you initially realized this or not, you were using a subtler energy body. You were using that Lambo that was already in your garage. Now, why? Could this be related to the near-death experience that you had? Maybe. After all, in your NDE, you were in those extremely subtle realms. And using these foundational principles, we know that our 5D travels are recorded and tracked, making them easier for us to return. So when we set our intentions to travel, you and I fire up those Lambos and not our trikes, and we just take off.
But it took you to tell me about it. So I appreciated that. And because I can go into those realms, I listen to my guides all the time. And recently they asked me to do a PowerPoint series on choices. And that was the big theme in my NDE. It's on my other YouTube channel, Exploring Consciousness with Donna, that PowerPoint. And choices always begin with how you think. So in the choices, I'm giving them how-to instructions, and I have people start their journey using sticky notes and writing their thoughts. So as you go through the day, you have your sticky note, and you're going to write what you think about people, things, and you're just going to write just a real quick note. This happened, and I go home, and you're going to put all the sticky notes on your wall. And you're writing your thoughts. And I tell them to look at them after a few days or a week. And that's really going to be the core of their belief system. And from that, judgment, which become that fuel, which will become the quality of the fuel you use for action. So once you become aware of all these judgments, I have them use a new set of sticky notes with different colors. So once you realize this, you're going to use a different color to change your judgments into reversing it by how you can think differently. Like I thought that about that lady's dress. Well, maybe you can think about the situation. Maybe she was poor and she didn't have a lot of money for clothes or whatever. So I teach them about reversing the fundamental attribution error. To recap, we did this in the other episode, Candy. It's fundamental, meaning we do it all the time. It's fundamental in our thinking as humans. We attribute, that's attribution. We're going to attribute something to this behavior, and we make an error. And what's the error? The fundamental way that we do it is we usually attribute it to their personality first instead of the situation. And let me give you another example. So a guy cuts me off in traffic, and I race up to him to give him a piece of my mind. Like, what? So I attributed it to his personality. I thought, well, you so-and-so. But when I got caught up, I looked inside the car, and I saw the passenger holding an obviously injured child, and they were obviously trying to rush that child to the ER. It wasn't a rude driver that I attributed to, but they were in serious need to get to the ER. So my first sticky note would be, I called this guy a name and rushed up in traffic. That would be on my first sticky note. My second sticky note, oh my gosh, I realized they weren't a rude driver, but they were in serious need to do that. And when you have that all over your wall, you start looking at, oh my gosh, I'm looking at the situation first, not the personality. And I'm making an active awareness to reverse the fundamental attribution error, to think differently.
Donna, I remember when you brought up the fundamental attribution error when we did our podcast, and it's like, I'd never heard of that, and it was wonderful. Now, when you first mentioned sticky notes to me, I didn't quite understand how you were using them. Now, my messengers put a little different twist on this. They became a tool for me. I didn't have to actually engage my intellect. I didn't have to pull up my beliefs. The
Yeah.
sticky notes became a shortcut. In fact, they just happened without me thinking about them. But they were in real time observer thoughts. So let me share an example. A couple of days ago, I was getting ready to exit this busy parking lot, and I was headed toward the exit, and there was a car stopped ahead of me. Now, as I approached, I saw their backup lights come on. Now, I was several car lengths back, so I just stopped. When I saw them maneuver to do a U turn in this tight space, my sticky notes spontaneously started working over time. What on earth is she doing? Not only had her U turn put her in the direct path of oncoming cars, but luckily there weren't any there, but then she ran up on the curb and then came down with what had to have been like a teeth rattling bump. More sticky notes. What an idiot! She's driving like a maniac. Now, my sticky notes are real time conversations, things that you usually do not say out loud. Well, maybe just one word like idiot or maniac, but I stayed back, giving this crazy driver, another sticky note, a wide berth. As she passed me, she looked at me and shook her head. No. And my first thought was, oh, did she hear my critical thoughts? Another sticky note. Then she used this universal sign to indicate I needed to turn around. I didn't understand it, so I inched forward a few feet and I saw the problem. Just beyond the exit, a truck and a trailer were parked and unloading equipment. They're not supposed to do that. Couldn't they find a better place to unload the equipment? So there's another sticky notes. Now who's the idiot, Donna? Me. I immediately realized this was a real-time learning lesson. By using those sticky notes as tools for these judgments, incorrect judgments, I must say, I realized I was fueling my actions with negativity. The TEA formula. The vehicles blocking the road were not visible till you got to the exit. There was no other option but to turn around. She was not a crazy driver. She was doing the only thing she could do, reverse directions. And not only that, she took the time to warn me, the critical one, before I repeated her error. How kind. So I used your sticky notes to record my observer without knowing it. It just happened. It was a spontaneous tool. But especially when my observer is overly critical, I know to be objective and then to wait and see the larger picture. I certainly do that when I receive messages, but when I'm driving my car, that part of me apparently disappears. But those sticky notes reminded me that I'm judging and I'm forming beliefs based on incomplete data. Now, those sticky notes show me that the E in the TEA is not the high octane fuel that I prefer. The sticky notes give me time to pause, hopefully stopping me from judging or jumping into that rabbit hole that leads absolutely nowhere. So now, Donna, these sticky notes are a valuable tool for me to use, and they arrive spontaneously in real time. So when I slip into my judgmental observer, sticky note, sticky note, sticky note. So next time when I'm in a situation like that, when that first sticky note comes in, I am going to take a deep breath and I'm going to take that, let's wait and see what happens approach. So beginning with this foundational principle of the TEA formula, we take charge. Donna, we control our destinies, one thought at a time. You could say one sticky note at a time. That sticky note gives us a clue about the E, the energy in TEA. I think of the E as emotion, energy in motion. If we have a thought or an intention and we fuel it with the energy of doubt, so a lower emotion or vibration, it's like using water instead of gasoline in a car. You'll never reach the A, the action. Your thought goes nowhere. It stalls. Your thought or intention gets derailed. Now, we'll talk about that emotion, the type of fuel, soon when we introduce the next foundational principle. But now, what I want to do is take a look at how our tools relate to the TEA formula, because that is key. Our psychic tools shortcut the TEA process. We move directly from T to A. We bypass the E. That means there's no wiggle room to derail our thoughts. It is instant manifestation, that's the A, the action, of the T. So, how do we skip the E? We program it so that it becomes automatic. My training as a psychologist, when we did behavioral modification, we talked a lot about Pavlov. And remember his famous experiment? I talked about this in an earlier episode. Pavlov paired feeding a dog with ringing a bell. Now, a ringing bell is a neutral object, but soon the dog began to salivate. That's the A in TEA, the action, when the bell rang. The food was the initial fuel to cause salivation, but now we have that neutral object, a bell, that causes the action. Why? Because we have trained, we have programmed, conditioned that response. Look at our psychic tools after a couple of uses, and often immediately, our psychic tools become conditioned just like Pavlov's bell. The tools are no longer neutral objects, but devices with a predetermined, a programmed action. And like Pavlov's dog, we go straight to the action, straight to the manifestation. Now, remember how thought responsive the 5D is? That's how the tools work. It's the energy of the 5D that responds to the tools.
Again, we can use Pavlov, we can use T, we can use what I said in choices. It's different words. The sticky notes make you aware, but then you use the second sticky note to change, and then you practice it so that it becomes that you're no longer having to go through the day. Oh, there's another sticky note. There's another sticky note. You end up going, at the end of the day, when you look at how you did during the day, you realize you changed, you reversed the fundamental attribution. So that's what we're getting at. You're changed. You're a kind person. You're different. You have different fuel for your action.
And what's so great about your sticky notes is now, as soon as one comes up, I immediately stop because I know I'm going down that rabbit hole. So that became a tool for me, not intentionally, but in real time, it manifested and it worked. And that's how, once you really have a good understanding of why Tom's Park works, why the tools work, you start becoming empowered because it's back on us. We are the ones who make those determinations. Now, that T formula is fundamental, but let's look at why. Now, let me introduce that fourth and final. It's final until we find more, but we've got the fourth foundational principle are the operational components. One is a GPS, and the other is a quality control system. This fourth operational component, they are behind everything that we do. And they are always on, always running in the background of our lives, even when we're sleeping. But once we become aware of these operational components, we can use them. The GPS automatically maps out our 5D travels. But when we discover that we can drop a pin in our electronic maps, it becomes a game changer. Now, my messengers refer to those GPS pins as bookmarks. And when we start using our bookmarks, that is priceless. The quality control component is equally valuable. It allows us to see in real time whether our manifestations are on track in both the 3D and the 5D. Then we can adjust how to fuel our thoughts in the TEA, Thoughts, Energy, Action formula. On my dashboard, I mentioned this in an earlier episode, I have a radar screen that comes up, and it actually lets me see if my manifestations are aligned with my thoughts. But learning about these 4 foundational principles has really changed me. And my out-of-body experiences really seem magical and they seem mystical, but they're not. That is just how energy works. And we are the ones in control. We can access doors that were once closed. And in fact, most of us, we don't even see the doors, much less enter them. But when I'm in these spaces, I do try to hold off judgment so that I can be the objective observer. I obviously was not doing that or do not do that when I'm driving a car, but now I have that tool of the sticky note. I know that the time for analysis comes later. If I had just waited with this woman who was driving crazy, sticky note, and I'd inched up to see what was happening, I would have understood without having negative judgment. So by not judging, it's easier to stay in those spaces of the 5D. Okay. So in other words, when those sticky notes start popping up, it's a clue for me to engage in neutrality, to take a deep breath and just wait, just observe. When those after the fact validations arrive, that's when things get real, Donna. That's when my connection to the 5D becomes a game changer. How in the world would I know something that I never studied, I never read about, or heard about in conversation?
And Candy, you use all these tools, and if you keep saying, okay, I'm still stuck on whether it's me or not, we get the validation. And we see this over and over with you. And when you receive that validation that you're always shocked at, there's something called veridical evidence, not vertical. You know that it's true and your tools do work. So as you guys are practicing, you will get this veridical evidence and you go, oh my gosh, that's what they were talking about. It's true. And I can go back to episode 16 where you were talking about, remember your very detailed dream about the crystals, the sun with the divergent rays, and the lotus flower with the 1,000 petals. You didn't know about that. You got that in your dream. And your curiosity, so you got it first, and then your curiosity led you to Professor Google, your favorite friend, and you Googled and found 1,000 petal lotus, and you were shocked to learn this is what the crown chakra is often called. But once again, you were verifying parts of the messages that you received.
I am always thankful that I was such a neophyte when I started channeling. I did not know the basic things like the crown chakra is known by 1,000 petal lotus. I knew nothing. So that gave me a lot of information that I could validate. And those validations encouraged me to continue. Now, when you talk about that veridical evidence, I had no idea what that was. I've heard you mention it before, and I had to actually look it up. And, my friend, Professor Google, said that a veridical paradox, for example, is a conclusion that, despite it appearing to be absurd or crazy, is true. And those things happen to me time and time again. There was a lot of information we could prove because I knew nothing. But Other examples, I remember having a conversation with someone named Kuan Yin. I had no idea who that was. I thought I was making it up. And I was shocked to learn that there was someone by that name who had actually existed. She's the Mother Mary counterpart in the Buddhist religion. Same thing about Chiron, an entity from the cosmos who identified themselves by that name. I had never heard the word Chiron, but somehow I knew how it was spelled with the CH, and I knew how it was pronounced. And another shock came when I Googled the name and found out there was a name matching both the spelling and the pronunciation. How did I know that? Chiron is a hybrid, part star, part planet, part comet. Also, let's think about White Buffalo Calf Woman, that native icon from the Lakota Sioux Nation. I had never heard of her until I heard from her. And there was so much more information about singularities, gravity wells, star tetrahedrons, Merkabas, constellations. The list goes on. And time after time, the information from the messengers was completely foreign to me. Nothing I'd ever read about or studied. So it was not in my memory banks, yet there it was. Verifiable information. That's your veridical paradox in action. And it is this veridical information that makes us realize that concepts like the TEA formula and the foundational principles do indeed have merit. Donna, you're right. These validations shift your perspective. For me, I eventually realized the truth. The information I received was not my imagination. I knew that on one level, of course, but I would doubt. How on earth could this be true? But it was. When I finally embraced my new path, my openness allowed even more information to flow, just like that crimped garden hose. That's why your sticky notes work. That's why I know these psychic tools work. I've used many of them before I even knew what they were, that they were tools. My messenger showed them to me along with formulas describing why and how they work. So the foundation for this work was from the messengers, but for me, it was also experiential. I know what I know. These are tools. They work. I've seen them work. Donna, what you bring is such a beautiful balance. You bring to the table that broader perspective and the validation. Some of the experiences that Donna and I have cannot be verified, yet those we did validate, they taught us to trust. And that trust goes a long way in keeping us open to our paths of discovery. Now, of course, we always use discernment in any relationship, whether it's in the 3D or the 5D. If our hearts say that something doesn't feel quite right or we're not comfortable if it feels off, we go with our internal guidance system. But the messengers have proved to me, and I dare say Donna, that the information they share is reliable, valid, and trustworthy.
Well, Candy, I really like that. And you've taught us about trusting ourselves. We have to trust ourselves like you do and you did. Just trust, and you will find validation afterwards. If you can, then use these tools until they become natural to you. This is what brings us to these teachings. Trust, validate, sometimes not, and repeat. You can also show that you can start with your imagination and look for the signs of veridical truth. After you experience them with these truths, sticky notes and change, all of this. And together we make a great team, Candy.
Oh, yes, we do. We make a great team. Okay, so now we have discussed those 4 foundational principles for OBE adventures, for messages, and it looks like a good place to end this episode. In our next recording, Donna and I will address all those tools. Not all those tools, they're always growing, but we'll address some of the newest tools that we've looked at. We're going to look at some that we've changed, and we're going to look at some that have stayed the same. So until next time, remember the importance of being kind. Look at life through a different set of lenses and see how your life will change.
Once again, we'd like to thank you for listening. The next episode of The Reluctant Messenger Unleashed version 2 will be episode 2, where we talk about the evolution of the tools and the way we access them. Until then, like, subscribe, share, and comment below. Thank you.